Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us this week at Palm Canyon Church. We'd love for you to stay connected with us throughout the week wherever you go, and the best way for you to do that is through the Palm Canyon Church app. It's free, and you can download the app from your device's app store. Stay tuned for Senior Pastor Bill Martin and this week's message.
So first of all, we're going to go over something incredible, an incredible tool for you to use 24/7 at home for life group, all sorts of awesome things. So if you would, pull out your phone. And if not, just humor me and pretend like you're doing it and just text somebody next to you. That's cool too. But get out your phone. If you have not downloaded the Palm Canyon Church app, head to your app store right now. It's a free download, Palm Canyon Church. But you're going to see there, if you open up your church app this morning, that right there we have a new tab. One, there's Awana on the top right. And then right below that is something called Right Now Media. Is there anyone in here already using Right Now Media? Whoop, whoop. Whoop. Sorry, I don't know. Apparently that's the noise for the day. No, Right Now Media is incredible. So go ahead and click on that tab, and you'll kind of see some different things. Yep, there's my awesome green arrow. Go ahead and go to the next one. So Right Now Media is a resource that the church uses, the church pays for you guys to have incredible access to some amazing videos. So it's got over 20,000 videos of different pastors, different authors, and I think one of the best parts of it is which we'll get to, is all of the resources for kids. So if you have a kid, make sure you download that, because you're going to find out there's more to watch on YouTube than Mickey Mouse, all right? So it's going to be awesome. But if you go on to that first page, you're going to see step 1, start here. Oh, backtrack a little bit. There it is, start here. So click on that, and this is a direct link. So you need this link to become part of the Palm Canyon Church program, if you will, so that you can see what we are specifically putting out for you. You can still download the app and do whatever you want, but if you want to be part of what we've got going on, you're going to click there, and you're going to create an account, and it will be your account from here until Kingdom Come. And then you'll see on there, you're going to click on that, create an account, and then boom, you have access. Now, the incredible thing about Right Now Media is it is an app for your phone. It's a regular website. You can download it on Roku TV. You can download it on Apple TV. So any smart device you have it on there so that you can watch at home, watch at your desk, watch on your phone. You can click to audio mode and just listen to it on your way to work. Incredible different things. So once you've created an account, you're going to want to download the Right Now Media app. So it's going to be a separate app once you get it going. And it's orange. It's got a little R on it right there. You can see I've already downloaded it, but you can click download and get that going on your phone. Go to the next one for me. And then once you have an account, I know if you're creating an account, it'll take a minute, but just keep following along with me. You're going to create an account, and on the top left, there is a menu bar. And then once you click on that, you'll see right there on the second image, Palm Canyon Church, and then you'll see our logo with a little welcome sign. And then you can access our Palm Canyon Church playlists. That's what they're called. So we have a few. We have a PC Kids playlist, PC Youth, so if you've got teenagers at home. And we have a Pastor's Favorites. And then we have a one-star leadership program. How many of you are on our dream team, our volunteer team? Let me hear you volunteers make some noise. So if you're a volunteer here at Palm Canyon Church, you have the opportunity as our dream team to earn your first star leadership badge. And this is the easiest way for you to do that. So you guys know the drill. You've already heard all about it. Right there are all of the videos, TED Talks, and podcasts. You can just click along there, fill in the blanks, and then that part of your star leadership program is done. Now, if you're not on the dream team, get on the dream team, because it's an incredible place to be. But you can download the app, and then you can scroll through menus and menus and menus of thousands of videos that are incredible. If you're in a life group, chances are you've watched one of the video series, because that's what a lot of the life group leaders use. One of the life groups right now, as a life group, is doing the First Star Leadership Program, which is very cool. And then you can just scroll, you can listen to it. Like I said, you can switch to audio mode so you don't crash in your car because you're watching the cool pastor on the video. But you can switch to audio, plug it in, listen to these messages on your way to work, pick your favorite authors and go through there. You can look at our favorites and find stuff that fits who you are and where you're at in your walk. And then the best part about this, on the bottom, if you're Right Now Media, at the bottom there you can see in the middle, there's a K, stands for kids. They have an entire kids program, and it's one of the biggest parts of Right Now Media. Incredible videos. There's Veggie Tales until Kingdom Comes. So any of you Veggie Tale people, I still know all the songs, all right? Am I like the youngest one in here? I might be. No offense. Just I'm really young. No, you can click on these. I have a 2-year-old, so I can download this app. I can play it on my phone, and instead of just giving my kid the phone and letting them watch YouTube all day long, they're watching Bible stories. They're watching interactive Bible lessons, and they're watching VeggieTales, which is also just fun, because what kid doesn't love VeggieTales? If you don't know what VeggieTales is, you better get on it, because it's incredible. So download the app, put it on your TV, go to the website, get hooked up. If you have any questions, you can find me after service. You can also email anyone in the office. We'll walk you through it all over again. But get your link through the Palm Canyon Church app, and then download the Right Now Media app. And then without furthermore, I will introduce Pastor Bill. Thank you for... I do have one more thing, guys. All right, as of this morning, we had 8 discount cards left to sell to meet our quota for the Fall Festival. So I have 8 more cards as of right now to sell. So if you're one of those 8 people that did not get your discount cards, come see us at the gazebo, and we'll get you one of these. $10, 5 of it goes to the Fall Festival, so you can be a part of serving our community on Halloween. All right, thank you.
Oh, now everybody's exhausted. Oh, man. That's a lot of female hype talk in there over those 2 people. And they're mine. That's just sort of a natural thing there, I guess. But anyway, I'm really, really glad you're here. You know, I've been thinking over the last couple of weeks, I don't know if it's just an age thing or just a season, you know, but I've kind of been wrestling with this thing, you know, so what about church? And you know, why when I stand up here and encourage you to be here, you know, why is that so important? And I started thinking about how that church does so much more than just give you a place to sit in air conditioning for, you know, an hour and a half or whatever on a Sunday, but that being in church and being in church like this makes a difference in your life across the board. I think about it relationally, I think about it emotionally, I think about it physically, financially, I mean, spiritually, of course, being a follower of Christ. I think how amazing that is. Church affects so much of your life. It's not just a spiritual thing. For those that think it's just a spiritual thing, it's much, much more than that. It is that, but it is more than that. And it can make a huge difference in your life and in your family's lives. And so we really encourage you to be a part of church. Plus, you know, you get to, you know, get some, well, to have a little bit of fun when you come here, you know, is part of it too. Like, I heard the story of a woman who visited her priest for her confession time. And she's in the confessional booth talking to her priest, and she says to him, "Father, forgive me, I'm guilty of the sin of pride." And then she paused and then said, "I look in the mirror and think of myself as beautiful." To which the priest responded, "Oh, that's not sin, that's just a mistake." Now, think what you will about that story. There is something kind of intriguing about that story, that someone would confess that they have a sin issue regarding pride. Just to see how this goes over, I want to ask you, how many of you would confess that you were guilty of a sin of pride? Okay, you see what I mean? Not very many people are responding to that, but watch this. How many of you either work with or know somebody that you believe is prideful, arrogant? Okay, some of you are just afraid to raise your hand about anything because you don't know where this is going, right? I mean, you think about it. Is there anything, could there be anything that'd be more deceptive? Could there be anything, a vice that is just easier to just sort of get a hold of your life, yet something very, very difficult to see in ourselves? Now, pride is something we despise in seeing in other people, yet we defend its presence in ourselves. We're talking about this ugly sin of pride, something that actually disgusts God. Before we get into this a little bit further, I want to say that every one of us were born with 2 innate fears. You and I were born with a fear of noises, and we were born with a fear of falling. Like your fear of spiders, that's something that you learned. You know, there are a lot of other fears that we deal with that are learned behaviors, but there are two innate things, a fear of loud noises and a fear of falling. Now, the fear of falling is something that's probably natural to all of us. Most of us fear falling, you know, because we're concerned about gravity. We're concerned about the fact that we can't fly and we don't bounce. And so falling is a serious thing. It's not a pleasant experience, and when we fall, it sort of interrupts what we were doing or what we were trying to do. And you've done it, right? You've slipped on something, you've fallen, you've tripped, you've done whatever, and there you were on the ground, and what a nuisance falling can be, right? But falling is a real and present danger to all of us, but especially there are huge health implications to the aging community. If you're 65 or older, you fear falling more than you fear robbery, financial stress, or health problems. And then paradoxically, the fear of falling actually increases the risk of falls. Yeah, so the fear that you have of falling now all of a sudden has increased your risk of falls. They say 30% of adults 65 years and older fall each year. So if you're 65 or older, there's a pretty good probability that you'll fall this year. I mean, that sounds like really bad news. But so what can you do about it to help prevent that? Right? What can you do to prevent falling? Well, for one, you can correct your vision problems. Now, I'm around seniors a lot, and I watch people that have problems with their glasses, especially with the whole bifocal and trifocal thing. You know, people are trying to have just one pair of glasses to do it all, and it doesn't always work so well, and so people are walking like this, and, you know, they don't have good depth perception and such, so correct your vision problems, get the right, you know, get the right prescription. Be careful about medications, because if you're on a sleeping pill, you could fall, right? Yeah, that could affect you. So you know, be careful about that, and work to build some strength and to improve your balance, so that when you're walking, you're a little bit more stable on your feet, right? But what happens, unfortunately, the more we age, the more we sit, and the more we sit, the less muscle development, the more muscle deterioration, I guess. And so, you know, we don't have even core strength to keep ourselves standing up erect. So just from a practical point, those are a couple things you can do. Now, am I going to talk about more than just that? Yeah, of course. But that's just a freebie. I want you to know that there are some free things that you get here today. You don't have to just buy a $10 card, but you get that for free. Now, most likely you've heard someone say, pride goes before a fall. But you might not even realize that that phrase actually comes from the book of Proverbs. And you've probably quoted that verse, not even realizing that you were quoting a verse. For example, you're at work and you're talking to a colleague and you're discussing your boss. And you say something like this, our boss thinks he's so great. He treats everyone working under him like we are all idiots. Your colleague says, I know. It's ironic because he's honestly not that special of a guy. He has a very overinflated view of his own abilities. And then you say, don't worry, pride goes before a fall. He'll eventually get what he deserves. We all use those kinds of expressions. We tend, though, I think when it comes to pride, we tend to think people who are prideful are those who are arrogant, you know, and boastful. But pride has a way of manifesting itself in so many other ways, such as a refusal to admit wrongdoing, a refusal to ask for help, a refusal to ask for forgiveness. And so as I've been working on this message for today, I think my diagnosis is in. I have an issue with pride. As I start thinking, you know, I don't like to admit it when I'm wrong. I don't like to ask for help. I'm determined to fix my own problems. I like to be right, and I like to be the guy with all the answers. And I realize The diagnosis is, Bill, you have a pride problem. So in our series called Foolproof, we're going to look today about how to lead a pride-free life. Now, there's some things that I think we need to know up front about pride. Number one, pride is, we could define it as this. Pride is living independently of God. It's this illusion that we have that we are competent to run our own lives. We're competent to achieve our own sense of worth and find a purpose big enough to give us meaning in life without God being in the picture. It's our way of saying, God, I am self-sufficient. I have everything I need. Your services are no longer required. And pride gives us this false illusion that we don't need God, and I think that's one of the things that irritates and agitates and displeases God to the point that he hates it. Now, pride first made its major appearance, its debut, long before humanity ever occupied the face of the earth. There was an angel by the name of Lucifer, whose name meant shining star, who was one of God's preeminent angels, the chief angel in charge, and one day looked in the mirror and became all too smitten with himself and answered his own riddle by saying, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, I'm the fairest of them all." Eventually, he gets the boot out of heaven, right? We understand that story. God was dissatisfied with that approach to things, declaring that he was going to be God, that he was trying to ascend to heaven and set his throne above the stars. That's what Lucifer said, and so God gave him the boot. It's trying to live independently of God. A second thing you need to know about pride is that God absolutely hates pride. Now, there are lists of things in the Bible that God despises, and there are lists in the Bible of things that God really does enjoy. Now, in the category of things that God does not enjoy and that God despises or that God hates, he does not take pleasure in arrogance or pride. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 6, in verses 16 and 17, he says, there are 6 things the Lord hates. No, 7 things he detests. Haughty eyes being the first one. Now, this is some language that you might not recognize up front what this really means, but haughty eyes does not refer to how a person's eyes look at others, but how a person views himself and others. In other words, this person views himself as better than and others as less than himself. They can also be, he views these people as being worthless. So in other words, he's arrogant, he's puffed up with his own sense of value. Another thing you need to understand about pride is that pride is the root cause of all forms of sin. If you were to excavate your sin as an archaeologist might do, beneath them all, you would discover the rotting bones of pride and arrogance. For example, take the sin of envy. There's the sin of envy because you don't want others to appear better than yourself. There's the sin of bitterness because you think you look bad in the eyes of others, or you've been deprived of something that you think you deserve. Or there's the sin of deceit, because you want to gain something for yourself or hide something that might make you look bad to others. Or maybe like the sin of hypocrisy, which is often the fear of being seen and known for what you really are. All sins really stem from pride. Another thing that you need to know is that pride creates conflict. At the root of every quarrel, every conflict, every battle, every war is the sin of pride. Proverbs 13:10 said, pride leads to conflict. So the next argument that you hear, the next church that splits, the next divorce that destroys a home, you now know what's at the root cause of those things. Another thing you need to understand is that pride distorts our view of reality. I mean, our reality is so messed up and so distorted that we can't even laugh at ourselves. We think we're so indispensable that we can't even take a break from work, or that we're just all too important and we can't have anybody think of us as being unflattering. You need to know that pride kills us without us knowing. Somebody said pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. It silently and slowly kills you without you even knowing. And finally, pride results in destruction. One of Aesop's fables concerned a turtle who envied the ducks who swam in the pond where he lived. And as this turtle would listen to these ducks describe the wonders of the world they had seen, he had this tremendous desire that he too wanted to travel. But being a turtle, he wasn't going to be able to travel very far. But finally, two ducks offered to help him. And one of the ducks said to the turtle, "We will each hold the end of a stick in our mouths, and you hold the stick in the middle with your mouth, and we'll carry you through the air so that you can see what we see when we fly." Well, the turtle was stoked about this. He took hold of the stick, and away into the sky they went. And these ducks flew him above the trees, circled around the meadow. I mean, the turtle was just amazed and overjoyed. He now has a new perspective of the world. He was just overwhelmed with the flowers on the hillside. And just then a crow flew past. Astonished at the sight of a turtle flying through the air carried by two ducks, the crow said, "Surely this must be the king of all turtles." "Why, certainly," the turtle began. But as he spoke, he lost his grip on the stick and fell to the ground below. Pride is really the first chapter in the book of your failure, and mine as well. Proverbs 18:12 says, "Pride ends in destruction." What kind of destruction? Well, we find relationships are destroyed, personal properties destroyed, families, churches, wealth, businesses, all destroyed because of pride. We're trying to obtain something that maybe we didn't earn or that the Lord hasn't blessed us with. Destruction follows. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride goes before destruction and haughtiness before a fall." Proverbs 29:23 says, "Pride ends in a fall." And what does a fall do? A fall separates us from others, and separates us ultimately from God. We've all been there. Despite the fact that you're hesitant to raise your hand that you deal with the sin of pride, we all do. It's somewhat prideful, funny to say, that you don't raise your hand that you deal with the sin of pride. But it's okay. I understand. We've all experienced the fall because of pride. Now, to help us with this, I want to take us actually to a New Testament story, to a story found in Luke chapter 18, that Jesus is telling this story to a group of people of which apparently some are arrogant and prideful in themselves. And so he tells this story about two guys who go to the same place for the same purpose. In Luke 18, starting at verse 9, the Bible says, "Then Jesus told this story to some who had great confidence in their own righteousness and scorned everyone else. Two men went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other was a despised tax collector." So we've got two men, one a Pharisee and one a tax collector. And they're both going to the temple, or if it's easier to understand, they're both going to church in order to pray to God. They're doing what you've done today. Two guys, one a Pharisee. Now, a Pharisee is a representative, really, of the religious people of his day. He was a religious leader, a person who understood the laws of God. Now, there are 613 laws of God in the Old Testament, and this Pharisee would follow them to a T. And here he is going to church. There's two guys. The other guy is a despised tax collector. And the reason he's despised is because he just didn't collect taxes for his government, but he collected taxes for the Roman Empire, who had come in and conquered his country and were oppressing his people. So it was like this guy that you grew up with is taking your money to to fund the expansion of the government that's occupying your country. But it wasn't just that. He took more than was required, making himself wealthy. To help you understand this would be like a corrupt politician who was lining his or her own pockets. Or it would be like the drug dealer who's selling drugs to his own neighborhood to make himself rich. Two guys going to the temple on the same day for the same purpose, to talk to God. Now, the Bible tells us about the first one, that this Pharisee stood up, distanced himself from everybody else who was there, and began to pray. Verse 11, I thank you, God, that I am not like other people, cheaters, sinners, adulterers. I'm certainly not like that tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I give you a tenth of my income. Now, I think what he's really saying is, God, thank you that I do the right things, and I thank you that I'm better than everybody else who's here around me. Now, had he done some good things? Yeah, certainly. I'm sure he had done some good things. Do you realize that for a Pharisee, by the age of 12, he would have memorized the first 5 books of the Bible? Not that he could just quote the names, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. No, he memorized and could quote all 5 books front to back. I'm sure he had a lot of other good things going in his life. But instead of seeing the good things in his life as a gift that God had given him, or a gift from God, he somehow saw himself as a gift to God. Now, before we look down our noses at this Pharisee, we'd be wise to recognize and acknowledge the Pharisee that lives in all of us too. Instead of thanking God that you get to be a part of a church where you get to see God move every week, it's more like, God, you're welcome that I showed up today. Or instead of, God, thank you for the gift you've given me and the children you've placed in my home, that I have the privilege of raising them to follow you, it's more like, Lord, you're welcome that I bring them to church. You see, it's easy to stop seeing the good things in our lives as gifts from God and begin to see ourselves as a gift to God. That's part of the Pharisee that lives within us. We begin to experience this pride. And pride really tries to promise us 3 different things. First of all, tries to promise us self-sufficiency. That's when we'll respond like, I've got this. I've got what it takes. I don't need anybody else. I mean, hey. It also promises self-importance. Hey, I'm valuable. I live in the right neighborhood. I carry the right purse with the right label. My kids go to the right school. I have an important job. I serve as a leader at the church. Also promises self-exaltation. Hey, I'm better. I'm better than anybody else. I mean, everybody, look at me. Look what I can do. Now, the funny thing about pride is this inward emotion that leads to this outward action that we would never want to normally be associated with in other people. It's the one thing that drives us nuts about others, but yet it becomes a part of us. Some of you might remember when you got your first car, right? I remember when maybe you remember when you got your first car. I remember when our son turned 16 and he got his driver's license and he wanted a car, and I distinctly remember him saying, I will never drive a used car. And I was like, well, praise the Lord for that. That's amazing. That's amazing. Until he realized that, he didn't have the kind of money it would take to buy a new car, but through an inheritance, he had enough money to buy a used car. And he bought it. Actually, he still drives it to this day, which it just kind of cracks me up every time he talks about that. I think about, I'll never drive it. Yeah, you've been driving a used car for, 15, 16, 17 years now. The same one, actually. You might remember when you got your first car, it might have been one of those vehicles that really helped your prayer life, because you would pray as you drove in it that nobody would see you driving in that, nobody that knew you would see you. Right? And then all of a sudden the day came when maybe you got a job and you got the car that you wanted or the truck that you wanted, and all of a sudden, you became, a little prideful about that. Hey, look at me. You see, there's a little bit of Pharisee, I think, in all of us. There's a little bit of Pharisee in all of us. And that Pharisee in all of us, man, we become good at some things. We become good at comparing ourselves to others. Would you look at what that lady's wearing? I can't even imagine that somebody would even let her out of the house in that. I mean, come on now, I think the reason we compare is that it's easier to have value and to feel value in ourselves by lifting ourselves up by putting other people down. Parents do this all the time. Husband says to his wife, sweetie, I know we're not perfect parents, but like John and Michelle's kids, they're crazy. Those kids are going to wind up in prison if something doesn't happen there. Okay, that's to make John and Michelle feel a little bit better about their parenting so they can lift themselves up by pushing other people down. We become really good at fault finding too. We're an expert in everybody else's faults. I said we're experts in everybody else's faults. I said we're experts in everybody else's faults. Not our own, everybody else's faults. Because it's easier to focus on other people's faults than to allow God to address the faults that are in our own life. No, that one, okay. All right, we'll just let that one simmer for a little bit. That Pharisee in us, we become pretty good at attention seeking too. We're concerned about how many likes we get on our Instagram posts. We're more concerned about that than allowing God to really transform us to become more like Him. No, we do these kinds of things probably not because we wake up in the morning and really think that we're all that. There might be a few people like that, but I think most of us struggle with pride because we wake up in the morning and we understand and we realize we don't have it together. And we're really not that awesome. And so we spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort trying to convince everybody else, even trying to convince God or trying to convince ourselves that we're okay and that we're pretty good. But the problem is it all starts with the me. And my value becomes based upon what I accomplish and how I compare to everybody else around me, just like what the Pharisee was doing. There's two critical things I want you to see out of this story. First of all is this: when we're full of ourselves, there's no room for God. When we're full of ourselves, there's no room for God, and a fall or a stumble is inevitable. I mean, look at the Pharisee's prayer. Hey, I've got it together and I'm better than everybody else. There's really no room for God in that. There really is no room for God in that. Well, let's pick the story back up in verse 13 and see this, the comparison, the contrast between the Pharisee and the tax collector. So the tax collector is standing some distance away because he's unable to bring himself to the temple. Now, you understand this too, because there was probably a time in your life that you thought, going to church, if I walk in that building, lightning is going to strike. That's the feeling this guy had. I can't even go in there because if I go in there, I don't know what's going to happen. But you're going to see, he doesn't try to rationalize, he doesn't try to justify anything because he knew that without God's intervention, he's absolutely 100% hopeless. Now, there actually was, on a technicality, a way that he could have been made right by the law. And according to the law, he would have to pay back every penny he had ever collected plus 20%. So who's going to be able to do that? Nobody. So he's in a hopeless situation. So verse 13 says, "But the tax collector stood at a distance and dared not even lift his eyes to heaven as he prayed. Instead, he beat his chest in sorrow, saying, 'Oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner.'" Now, you have to give him some credit that he's at least honest with who he was. He understands who he is. He's honest about it. He's open about it, which I think prompts Jesus' response. When Jesus says, I tell you this sinner, not the Pharisee, not the Pharisee, returned home justified before God. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who lift themselves up will fall. Those who lift themselves up will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So this sin of pride in the Pharisee causes him to fall, whereas with the tax collector who empties himself with a humble heart is actually lifted up, which leads me to the second point. When we empty ourselves in humility, we're in the perfect position to be filled but filled up by God's grace. When we empty ourselves in humility, we're in the perfect position to be filled up by God's grace. Now, whereas I said before, pride is the first chapter in your book of failure. Humility is actually the first chapter in your book of success. Humility. Humility is recognizing that you do need God's help. Knowing that you can't truly succeed in your own strength. It's realizing that your abilities, your talents, and your gifts have been given by God. And you give Him credit for your accomplishments. Humility is being comfortable with who you are in Christ and seeking to build others up rather than yourself. Seeking to add value to relationships rather than to frustrate them. Now, Proverbs 3:34 is quoted twice in the New Testament. It's quoted once in 1 Peter 5:5, and it's quoted again in James 4:6. But when Peter and James quote this verse, they use a Greek translation of the Old Testament, and so Proverbs 3:34 in the New Testament is quoted as, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. God opposes the proud, I think in part because pride thinks itself as God. God opposes the proud. I mean, do you want to be in a position that God is opposing you? I mean, you think about just that phrase. The creator of the universe, the almighty, all-powerful, all-sovereign, all-knowing God is in opposition to you. It's like He's at war against you. Who in the world wants to be at war with God? It says, God opposes the proud but gives grace. Some translations say shows favor. He gives grace or shows favor to the humble. Now, the irony is that while pride seeks to honor itself, it reaps dishonor, whereas humility, which does not seek to honor itself, actually obtains it. Maybe we could put it like this: be humble or you'll stumble. Be humble or you'll stumble. Now, humility, again, it's one of those tricky things to try to understand. C.S. Lewis said, true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. I know sometimes, with good intentions, we sort of get it wrong about humility, and we think, I've got to, think less of myself. Now, Jesus is a prime example of a humble individual. Now, what you have to ask yourself, does that mean that Jesus had a lowly opinion of himself? Did Jesus walk around thinking, man, I'm probably the worst rabbi in all of Israel? I really suck as a person. I'm just a nobody. No, I don't think Jesus did that, which I don't think it's thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Now, pride is about my glory. Humility is about God's glory. Pride is about my glory. Humility is about God's glory. Now, let me show you this verse from Proverbs 22:4. It says, true humility and fear of the Lord leads to riches, honor, and long life. It doesn't get much better than that. So, when you're praying and when you're seeking to put on humility, think of it in terms of with humility. Humility, the Bible says, leads to riches, honor, and long life. Now, I'm not so much concerned about the riches or the honor, but the older you get, the more concerned you are about long life. Long life, not in diapers. I don't know how to say that, but, thinking about long life, I'm not talking about somebody on a ventilator, long life. I don't think that's what the promise is here. I think there's a promise about long life. I mean, oftentimes I find myself praying like Moses did, like was said of Moses, that when Moses died, he had the strength of a young man and he had tremendous eyesight. And I pray, Lord, I pray for a tremendous eyesight. I pray for the strength of a young man. We're praying that for my father-in-law, who's pastoring. He'll be 82 in a couple of weeks. God, give him the strength of a young man to continue to do what, he's passionate about doing. But humility brings about some side effects. You know, some of the side effects of pride, nobody's going to want to be around you. You fall and you become distant from other people and of God, but humility has some side effects as well. Side effects of riches, honor, and long life. So, how do we get to this place where we can be humble? And I started a list, and I had 4 or 5 things on this list, and then I kept thinking about it, and I kept adding to it. Now the list is up to 15. And I don't think this is even an exhaustive list, but I'm not going to spend 2 minutes on each one. So to begin to empty yourself, to begin to humble yourself, how about confess your pride? It goes back to the first question I asked you, and I'm not going to ask it again because I know the answer, so that was sort of a trick question. We all deal with this. The question is whether you will actually admit it, whether you will confess it to God. Second of all, ask for cleansing, both for the areas that you are aware of and for those that are unknown to you. Put others first. Serve others. Ask yourself, is this about my glory or God's glory? Know who you are and whose you are. Start more sentences with you rather than I. This is part of that think of yourself less. Admit mistakes. Take time to say thank you. Listen before you speak. Be willing to receive input and instruction. Speak up and speak out when situations need your influence. Accept feedback. Assume responsibility. Ask for help. In case no one has told you today, you don't have all the answers, and neither do I. Be humble or you'll stumble. The risk of physically falling grows with age. There are far more younger people stumbling in this sense with pride than ever thought about falling physically. Falling because of pride, stumbling because of pride, is no respecter of age or person. Be humble or you'll stumble. Now, I love the fact that God gives grace and He gives favor to the humble. And I think to be filled up by the grace of God means that you have the power of God, you have the presence of God, and you have the strength of God in your life. Now, to me, that's a whole lot better than saying as a prideful person, hey, I've got it all together, and guess what? I've got my own power, I got my own presence, and I got my own strength. And everybody else looking on goes, you're an idiot. Who cares? But to say, I seek to walk in humility, and with humility comes the power of God, the presence of God, and the strength of God in my life, that is profound. But we have to come to that point where we admit that we really do have a need of God. That's the interesting thing about the tax collector and the Pharisee. You would think the Pharisee, the religious guy, would know that he needed God, but he didn't. It was the heathen. It was the guy who had taken from people. It was the despised tax collector that realized he did not have it together and realized that he needed God. Now, you could be sitting here today and you're thinking, oh my goodness, my life has spiraled out of control. I don't know what to do. I feel hopeless. You know, you might be a parent and you've had a kid spiral out of control and you just think, I don't know what else to do. I've done everything I know to do. I'm not sure. I just don't get it. You might feel that way in your marriage or a relationship or with your job. Just things are so, I don't know what to do. I'm so overwhelmed with debt. You're just at that point where I think God wants you to look up. The problem is we just keep looking down instead of looking up. C.S. Lewis said, a proud man is always looking down on things and people. And of course, as long as you're looking down, You cannot see something that is above you. My counsel to you would be to lift your eyes and look up. But to look up is different than looking down on others and looking inside of yourself. Looking up is to look at God. And to, like the tax collector, to say, I am a sinner. I don't have the answer, God. I don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, God responds to the humility. I see the Pharisee standing there like beating on his chest like he's a Tarzan guy, right? Proclaiming that he's got it together. But the tax collector is a better example for us. As strange as it is, a better example for us. I don't have it together. I do have an issue with pride. That pride has led to other sin in my life. And I don't know what to do about it, God, but I am looking to you for help. Let's pray. Lord, pride just seems to come so natural and so easy. But when the fall happens, it's very painful. Some of us in this room, Lord, might physically have fallen in a sense because of prideful behaviors or things that we've pridefully put into our bodies or deprived our bodies from, that now we are suffering the effects of a fall, if you will, physically. Some of us here might be experiencing the fall of a relationship because pride and conceit and conflict destroyed something, and some of us are sitting here and there's just, our life isn't going anywhere. It's progressively getting worse, spiraling out of control. But I pray today, Lord, you would cause everybody to look up to you. And when we look up to you, we're acknowledging that we're not God, that you are God. It's not our power and presence and strength that's going to help. It's your power, presence, and strength that's going to help. And so we look to you, God, and lay hold of you and say, forgive us. Forgive us of our pride. And help us to become humble. Help us to become humble. It's not going to be easy, but help us to become humble so we don't stumble. I'm not sure where things are with you in your life. You could pridefully sitting here thinking, you know what, I've got it together, things couldn't be better, look at me and look what I've done. If that's you, I would just say brace yourself, because eventually a fall is going to happen. You're living in opposition to God, and that's not a good position to be in. Why would you want God opposing you when God can partner with you? He can work with you. He can help you. And to do that is to, first of all, acknowledge that you're not God, that He is, and that you need Him. You see, God sent His Son Jesus, and Jesus came to this planet, demonstrated what it looked like to be humble, but eventually had to die on a cross because of us and our mess-ups, screw-ups, and faults. To die for us in our place so that we could be forgiven and so that we could have the power, presence, and strength of God in us. You need to receive and accept what Jesus Christ has offered to you. He's offered you life. He's offered you freedom. He's offered you liberty. And instead of pridefully continuing on in life, doing it your way, Frank Sinatra's motto shouldn't be our motto. It's not, I did it my way. But yet I did it God's way. Right there at your seat or right there watching online, you can simply ask God to to change you and to come into your life. Like I said, the first thing is to confess you're prideful. To say something like, God, I acknowledge, I admit it, I confess it, I'm not going to keep that a secret. I have pride issues. And those pride issues have created sin issues for me, and I need your forgiveness. And without you, I'm hopeless. Without some kind of a rescue, I am hopeless. And so I invite you into my life. I think that's the key for you. That's what I found to be a key for me. And I ask, Lord, that you'd help us to be humble in Jesus' name. Amen. You know, think about pride and humility. Today's not a one-time victory for you. I wish it was. I wish that we all confessed our pride, and then we walk out that door, we never have to deal with it again. But it is something we struggle with here and there. And just constantly need to put on humility. 1 Peter 5, I think it is, says that we clothe ourselves with humility. When you get up in the morning, you get dressed, clothe yourself also with humility.
Thanks again for joining us this week at Palm Canyon Church. If you'd like to be a part of our generosity team, you can give now through the app or through palmcanyon.org. It's quick, it's easy, and there's a number of ways you can donate. Have a blessed week. This is Palm Canyon, this is home, and we'll see you next Sunday.